In a landmark decision, the United States Supreme Court has struck down the core of former President Donald Trump's trade tariffs, declaring the president overstepped his constitutional authority. The 6-3 ruling dismantles the trade wall that shaped American economic policy for years, signaling a dramatic shift in international trade and presidential power. Trump's tariffs, which imposed duties of up to 50% on hundreds of billions in goods, sparked global friction, disrupted supply chains, and raised prices for American families. Today's decision promises a return to a more predictable, rules-based trading system, but also raises urgent questions for industries that relied on protection. At the heart of the case, whether the president can use emergency powers to bypass Congress and regulate foreign commerce. The Supreme Court reaffirmed that only Congress holds this authority, sending a clear message that no president can unilaterally rewrite trade laws. Businesses, politicians, and the government now face a radically altered landscape, with billions in tariffs potentially to be refunded. This is not just the end of a legal battle. It's the start of a new era for the American economy and its global relationships. The full impact of this decision will unfold in the months ahead. The roots of this legal battle trace back to Trump's America First trade agenda, which imposed sweeping tariffs on imports, citing national security and unfair practices. Instead of seeking Congress's approval, the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, a law never intended for such broad, long-term tariffs. The move triggered fierce opposition from businesses and consumers, as costs soared and export markets closed due to retaliatory tariffs. Legal challenges mounted, led by importers like VOSU Selections, who argued the president was using emergency powers to conduct routine trade policy, an explicit congressional prerogative. Challengers warned that allowing such broad executive action would erase Congress's constitutional role in regulating commerce. The lawsuits framed the issue as a fundamental separation of powers crisis, not just an economic dispute. American families felt the pinch as prices rose, while workers in export-dependent industries saw jobs threatened. The tariffs created winners and losers, fueling a contentious national debate. This combination of economic disruption and constitutional conflict propelled the issue to the courts, making it a defining challenge to presidential authority. The first major blow to Trump's tariffs came from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which ruled 7-4 that the president had overstepped his authority. The court found the IEEPA was not a blank check for the executive, and that the tariffs far exceeded what the law allowed. To prevent chaos, the court stayed its ruling, giving the administration time to appeal to the Supreme Court. Business leaders hailed the decision as a victory for the rule of law and constitutional checks and balances. The appeals court's detailed opinion set the stage for a Supreme Court showdown, framing the debate as a core constitutional question. The majority opinion provided a clear legal basis for the Supreme Court to review the case. The final battle would be fought over the separation of powers at the heart of American governance. Trump's response was swift and defiant, condemning the ruling as a political attack and warning of economic disaster if tariffs were removed. His legal team appealed to the Supreme Court, arguing that the president's emergency powers under the IEEPA justified the tariffs, and that uncertainty threatened national stability. The administration insisted the tariffs remained in effect during the appeal, framing the case as essential to America's security and economic leverage. The appeal was both a legal and political statement, signaling unwavering commitment to the America First doctrine. Businesses, investors, and foreign governments waited in limbo as the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. The nation's highest court now held the fate of the tariffs and the scope of presidential power in its hands. At its core, the Supreme Court case was a classic constitutional showdown: presidential power versus congressional authority. Challengers argued the Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power to regulate foreign commerce and impose tariffs. They warned that broad delegation would undermine the structure of American government. The Trump administration countered that the IEEPA granted the president broad authority to confront national emergencies, including economic threats. They claimed tariffs were a legitimate tool under the law to protect national security. The Supreme Court majority disagreed, ruling that while the IEEPA grants significant power, it does not allow the president to rewrite the nation's tariff code. The opinion stressed that Congress's power over trade is fundamental and exclusive. Allowing the president to use emergency statutes for permanent tariffs would erase the boundary between legislative and executive branches. The decision reaffirmed constitutional limits on presidential authority, even in times of crisis. It's a powerful reminder that checks and balances are designed to prevent the concentration of power in any single branch. The Supreme Court's decision will trigger sweeping economic changes. Prices on thousands of imported goods are expected to fall, offering relief to consumers and businesses and potentially lowering inflation. The Congressional Budget Office estimates families could save over $800 a year. But the government now faces massive financial liability as companies seek refunds for billions paid in tariffs, potentially over $100 billion. For industries once protected by tariffs like steel and aluminum, the ruling means renewed foreign competition and possible job losses. The political fallout in industrial states will be intense. Globally, the decision is likely to ease trade tensions and pave the way for lifting retaliatory tariffs, especially benefiting American exporters. The U.S. must now recalibrate its trade strategy on the world stage. The ruling marks a fundamental shift in America's economic and diplomatic posture. The three dissenting justices mounted a strong defense of presidential power. They argued the court was overreaching into foreign policy and national security, where the president traditionally holds sway. The dissent warned that limiting executive authority could leave future presidents unable to respond swiftly to economic threats. They accused the majority of judicial activism and substituting their policy preferences for those of the elected executive. Supporters of Trump's agenda see the dissent as proof the ruling was politically motivated. The dissent provides a rallying point for those who favor a more muscular executive branch. The debate over the scope of presidential power is far from settled. The legal battle may be over, but the ideological conflict continues. With the Supreme Court's decision final, the government must unwind the tariffs. Treasury and Customs will halt collection at ports, a massive logistical task affecting billions in daily trade. Thousands of companies will file claims for refunds, triggering years of administrative and legal proceedings. The financial impact on the Treasury will be substantial, potentially affecting federal budgets. Internationally, the U.S. must reset relations with trading partners, negotiate the removal of retaliatory tariffs, and rebuild trust. Diplomats and trade officials face a busy period of negotiation and adjustment. U.S. trade strategy will shift from unilateral action to multilateral agreements. Politically, the ruling will fuel debate, celebrated as a victory for the rule of law by some, decried as judicial overreach by others. Congress may consider reforms to clarify presidential emergency powers. The nation faces a period of significant economic, legal, and political adjustment. The Supreme Court's ruling is more than a trade policy decision. It's a powerful affirmation of America's constitutional design. By striking down the tariffs, the court reinforced Congress's central role in regulating commerce and checked executive overreach. The decision sends a clear message: no president can bypass Congress to impose sweeping economic policies. It's a victory for the separation of powers at the heart of the republic. The battle over the tariffs exposed the real-world consequences of straying from these principles: economic uncertainty, global friction, and domestic division. The ruling challenges the nation to recommit to shared governance and the rule of law. The story of the Trump tariffs is a testament to the resilience of American democracy and its capacity for self-correction. This landmark case will be remembered for defending the constitutional principles that define the United States.